Is he the best undiscovered guitarist of all time? He doesn't show off. He doesn't pursue. When someone moves Joe Bonamassa, he simply listens, pulls them up, and they remain there forever. With outdated equipment, he was nevertheless able to achieve those amazing tones. He is more than just one of this generation's best blues musicians. He is a student, a historian, and an expert on the history and current state of the guitar. Joe has been touring the globe for decades, shattering stereotypes and bringing the blues back to life for a whole new generation. There's more going on beneath the speed and the flash, though. His fixation with excellence. The kind of greatness that is unconcerned with headlines and numbers. The sort that is impossible to fake. The kind that speaks through 6 strings and resides in your hands. Joe is not a trendsetter. He listens to the tone. And he never forgets when he discovers the actual thing. Time Clocks, Blues Deluxe, live at the Royal Albert Hall. Every aspect of the genre is covered in his CDs, but there's always a subdued reverence underlying the firepower. A tribute to the giants who molded his voice. Additionally, Joe's voice changes when he discusses those players, the ones that changed his path and rewired his brain. Devotion, not merely admiration. My respect for the legendary Jeff Beck, who passed away. The very mention of those phrases makes me shudder. Only a handful of the hundreds he's been inundated with made his short list. The selected ones that taught him more than just music and gave him shivers. These 5 guitarists are the most revered by Joe Bonamassa among all tone lords and soul bringers, and no one else has ever taken their place. First up, Eric Johnson. There are guitarists who play notes. Eric Johnson is a colorist. He was not merely admired by Bonamassa. He studied him as if he were scripture. Joe claimed that it seemed as though a new dimension had opened up when he first heard Cliffs of Dover. Johnson's controlled tone and wording. It was not rock, jazz, or blues. It was surgical, and it belonged to him. It wasn't just compliments when Joe remarked, "He's the only guitarist I've ever heard where every single note matters." Even the silence between them. It was a norm. Joe attributes his development of self-control, discipline, and the realization that speed is meaningless without clarity to Eric Johnson. He has also referred to RVA music as the record that changed his mind on multiple occasions. Bonamassa attempted to study Cliffs of Dover's Note 4NOT when he was a teenager. Not because he couldn't play it, but because it didn't feel right. He stopped halfway through. For the first time, he realized that tone is identity rather than method. Based on Eric Johnson, I gained a lot of knowledge about assembling rigs. On stage, his Johnson wasn't ostentatious. Although he was nearly motionless, his sound was massive, multi-layered, unadulterated, and unfakeable. Joe described it as though he was holding a studio compressor. He refrained from assaulting the instrument. He heard it. Additionally, Joe's ears were formed by Johnson's influence in addition to his playing. He developed his ability to discriminate between instruments, discern frequencies, and appreciate silence. Bonamassa's mixes breathe because of this. His solos develop rather than simply blow up because of this. It wasn't just the technical aspect, though. Joe once told Guitar World, Eric could have been a violinist or a synth guy, but he chose the guitar. And we're all better for it. Johnson also demonstrated to Joe that one did not have to dominate the stage to command it. One could be kind and still sound enormous. The volume didn't convey the passion. It was in the phrase that sounded like speech, the vibrato, and the glide. The problem is that Joe never forgot. Eric Johnson never made an effort to sound different. Neither a movement nor a trend included him. He created his own cosmos and opened it to others. Joe has repeatedly stated that he would just play Eric Johnson to someone who has never played a note in order to demonstrate flawless tone to them. He is not a guitarist. He uses it to paint. I'll never stop listening because of this. It's loyalty, not simply respect. Bonamassa still returns to Johnson like a compass pointing north, even after decades have passed, and he has hundreds of legends in his network. For clarity, not nostalgia. Stevie Ray Vaughan is number 2. Stevie Ray Vaughan had already influenced Joe Bonamassa's style of playing before he ever took the stage. It was obsession rather than merely admiration. Bonamassa listened to more than simply the Texas disaster. It was his home. In an attempt to figure out why the tape felt so enormous, he claimed he rewound it until it stretched thin. Not all of SRV's music was blues. He retrieved it from the brink, and it came like a lightning strike to a young musician in upstate New York. There was nothing slick about Stevie, as Bonamassa once remarked. Stevie made blues dangerous again. Raw, sweaty, emotional. He gave it teeth. He performed as though each note were pulling him through flames. The bends weren't neat. They were still alive. Bonamassa discovered early on that achieving perfection was not the aim. The truth was. Stevie Ray Vaughan performed as if the truth were impatient. When Bonamassa attempted to master the scuttle button, he was just 11 years old. It almost broke him, he said. It's due to the sensation rather than the pace. He got the notes exactly right, but there was still a gap. He came to the realization that timing is mechanical at that point. Groove, however, is spiritual. Everybody plays like Stevie. We all have this thing that kind of leads us to the Texas flood. Joe pretended to have anything to prove for years: complexity, speed, and accuracy. However, Stevie slowed down time. 10 notes weren't necessary. The proper one was all he needed. Premier Guitar was once told by Bonamassa that he didn't play blues licks. He performed whole ideas and words. That permanently altered my perspective on soloing. Joe continues to refer to SRV as the best link between rock and blues. He possessed his own fire, the spirit of Fricks, and the weight of Albert King. He was never introduced to Joe. He doesn't hesitate, though, when people ask him who he would have given anything to jam with. Furthermore, the influence is not limited to music. It's intimate. According to Joe, he would return to Lenny or Tin Pan Alley to regain his sense of groundedness throughout difficult years marked by burnout, pressure, and uncertainty. He previously stated, "If I ever forget why I do this, I put on Stevie and suddenly I remember." It wasn't just the way SRV played. It was the risk in every phrase, like the whole thing could fall apart but never did. That edge turned into a blueprint. Joe researched it, took inspiration from it, and even honored it in numerous performances. But since you can't mimic what Stevie had, he never attempted to replicate it. It can only be honored. Stevie Ray Vaughan is not regarded by Bonamassa as the greatest blues musician of all time. He refers to him as the most significant, the pivotal moment, and the spark that ignited a generation. Jeff Beck is number 3. Some guitarists are capable of shredding. Jeff Beck, on the other hand, didn't have to. Growing up, Bonamassa didn't strive to play like Beck. He looked for the reason Beck played. He exuded a sense of defiance. No formulae, no lyrics, just unadulterated passion twisted into a shape that no one else could match. It was like watching someone surf without a board, just instinct, balance, and air, according to Joe, who once remarked, Beck didn't play guitar solos. He had conversations with the instrument. Beck's phrasing wasn't flashy, it was alive. He'd glide, bark, weep, or disappear mid-note. It felt unpredictable, but never chaotic. Eddie Van Halen and Jeff Beck are the 2 rock guitarists whom most people would name as their favorites. When Beck passed away in 2023, Bonamassa did more than simply publish a memorial. He paused his tour to perform a low-key rendition of Where Were You? For respect, not attention. Being referred to as the best was never important to Jeff Beck. He often withdrew from celebrity, but to those who were watching, he was the trailblazer. Jazz rock, fusion, fuzz, feedback, and quiet. He was never motionless, and Bonamassa saw it. In an interview with Rick Beato, he reportedly remarked, Beck could make a guitar sound like a singer. He didn't bend strings. He bent reality. Bonamassa always appreciated Beck's ability to stay out of the spotlight. No pandering, no excess, simply honest expression. It has nothing to do with showmanship or quickness. The issue was intent. Beck's voice carried weight. Even those who weren't present. According to Joe, most guitarists aim to impress. Beck made an attempt to speak. He was unsettling because you felt vulnerable if you were listening. Beck could be aggressive on stage 1 minute and gentle the next. For Bonamassa, that dynamic range remained. He described it as the bravest playing he had ever heard. Joe also claimed that he never noticed arrogance in Beck, even though he was a god tier. Just risk, curiosity, and experimenting. This is how he once expressed it. Jeff Beck never did the same thing twice. He was timeless for that reason. Bonamassa makes a concerted effort to imitate that quality. Not the danger, not the licks, not the tone, nor the refusal to fit into a box. In Joe's more subdued times, you can hear it. The wording deviates from the rules and raises issues. Beck is that person. That's the sound of a musician who transformed the guitar into a force that could change shape. Jeff Beck is not referred to by Bonamassa as the most influential guitarist. He claims that once you hear him, you never stop pursuing that type of freedom, making him the most crucial person to listen to. The 4th is Danny Gatton. He was never referred to as famous by Bonamassa. Unmatched, he said. Stardom was not something Danny Gatton pursued. He did nothing but play. Additionally, he performed as though he had every genre at his fingers, according to Joe Bonamassa. Rockabilly, blues, country, and jazz. They weren't blended by Gatton. He forced them to converse. Bonamassa found Danny Gatton through a bootleg tape when he was a teenager. Joe once remarked, Danny Gatton could outplay anyone, but he never wanted the spotlight. He just wanted to be left alone with his Telecaster. He was hearing things he couldn't believe. Surges in volume that had a pedal steel sound. Plucking chicken more quickly than most shredders. Before he attempted to play it himself, Joe believed it to be a joke. He was unable to, not even close. Even though Gatton's right hand moved robotically, the feeling remained. Without blinking,
He could rocket through a bebop line and land on a country twang. Joe once compared listening to Gatton to witnessing someone use barbecue sauce to do brain surgery. It worked even if it didn't make sense. I met Danny Gatton, a guitarist, and he was the first person to truly mentor me. I was 11 or so. There's a reason why other guitarists, not fans, referred to Danny Gatton as the humbler. He could make something swing without a band. All he wanted was room. Additionally, Joe claimed that trying to replicate his feel almost crushed him. Bonamassa later admitted, I practiced Danny's licks for 6 months. I got the notes, but not the soul. That's when I realized some people are just built different. But Gatton's genius came at a cost. He never wanted the fame, but he felt the weight of being ignored. The music industry didn't know where to place him, too. Too technical for blues, too humble for rock. He played for bar crowds who didn't clap. He worked in garages when he wasn't on stage. He didn't network. He didn't chase labels. He just played. And one day he stopped. In 1994, Danny Gatton ended his life in his Maryland garage. No farewell tour, no final album, just silence. Joe never forgot that. In multiple interviews, he's mentioned Gatton's death. Not to sensationalize it, but to underline the loss. What happens when genius slips through the cracks? He once said Danny Gatton was the greatest guitarist no one ever heard, and now they never will. Bonamassa keeps Gatton's memory alive by covering his songs, talking about him on stage, telling young players to look him up. Because to Joe, Danny Gatton wasn't a footnote. He was a warning. That talent alone isn't enough. That soul can't always survive the silence. And sometimes the loudest voices in music are the ones we forgot to hear in time. Number 5. B. King. Some musicians change your life. B.B. King changed Joe Bonamassa's entire path. They met when Joe was just 12 years old, still a kid, still wearing a blazer that didn't quite fit. But when B.B. invited him on stage, something happened. The crowd disappeared. The nerves dropped. And Joe learned the most important lesson of his life. You don't need to be loud to be heard. Bonamassa later said, he taught me that 2 notes played with intent can hit harder than 100 played fast. B.B. wasn't just Joe's hero. He was his mentor, his anchor, his reminder that music wasn't about technical display. It was about soul. And once King took him under his wing, Joe never looked at the fretboard the same way again. The two toured together over 20 shows. Night after night, Joe watched B.B. play with less and say more. He saw how King didn't need to run. He waited. Let the note bloom. Let the silence settle. I met B.B. King May 24th, 1990, and it changed my life. And B.B. didn't lecture. He didn't critique. He just gave encouragement, stories, stage time. Joe once said that just hearing B.B.'s laugh backstage taught him more about presence than any solo ever could. In a 2010 interview, Joe said, B was the blueprint. He taught me how to play the guitar while speaking without raising your voice. Joe continues to discuss B.B. as if he were still present. He continues to perform his tunes. On stage, he is still mentioned. In times of uncertainty, he can still hear his voice, instructing him to breathe and slow down. Furthermore, Bonamassa did more than simply post an homage to B.B. King after his death in 2015. He gave him a tour. The entire set list was revised to pay tribute to the man who taught him self-control and gave him his first genuine break. Perhaps because only one of Joe's heroes came this close, Joe once remarked. B didn't just open the door. He handed me the key and told me to walk through. There's a photo from their early shows. B.B. with his signature smile. Joe, just a kid, eyes wide, guitar in hand. It looks like a passing of the torch. Only one was familiar. Furthermore, Bonamassa's list of favorites isn't based on legacy, fame, or speed. Feel is key. And B.B. King was the only one who ever experienced the blues. Joe Bonamassa was never one to follow trends. To be heard, he never yelled. He simply played while thinking of the people that inspired him to do so. Not every player appears on that list. There were several with the chops. Fewer felt it. And only a select few were able to extract something from Joe that even he was unaware existed. These 5 did. He never let them go after they did. Who, in your opinion, came close to making the cut? Or perhaps ought to have? Leave a guess in the comment section. You already know what to do if you're the type of person who can hear more in a single note than most people do in a solo. Get early access to in-depth analyses, unpublished tales, and guitar ghosts that influence the sound by like and subscribing. It doesn't matter who played the fastest in Joe Bonamassa's world. Who stayed is what matters. The ones that stayed in the room all the time.